When I first published my video course on software architecture, a friend reached out asking whether the content covers data and service mesh. Intrigued, I decided to dive into this topic and add it to my video course curriculum. Today, I'm excited to share what I've learned about service mesh and why it's essential. To truly grasp the importance of service mesh, we first need to talk about microservices, which have revolutionized the way we build and scale applications. But they also introduced new complexities. Understanding these complexities is key to appreciating the value of service mesh. Mastering microservices, unraveling service mesh for modern software architecture. This video is an excerpt from my video course Software Architecture from Foundations to Cutting Edge. What's a service mesh? A service mesh is a dedicated infrastructure layer that handles service-to-service communication in a microservices architecture. It handles core networking tasks to ensure smooth, secure, and efficient interactions between services. In a complex microservices system where failures are common, the network's ability to reroute, retry, proactively fail, and report on these failures is crucial. This is where a service mesh shines. What's a data mesh? On the flip side, a data mesh is a pattern for managing data in a microservices environment. Imagine your data landscape as a bustling marketplace. A data mesh transforms this market by treating each piece of data like a precious product, with individual teams acting as dedicated shopkeepers. These teams take full ownership and responsibility for their data stores, ensuring data is fresh, accessible, and well-maintained. This approach decentralizes data ownership and governance. Data mesh versus a service mesh. While both data mesh and service mesh operate within the same microservices city, they serve different purposes. The service mesh is like the city's infrastructure, roads, traffic lights, and signs. It manages communication between all the different services or buildings and ensure messages travel smoothly, securely, and efficiently across the city. In contrast, a data mesh is akin to the community markets within the city, where each team or market stall owner is responsible for their own data or products. They ensure data is well governed and accessible. So while they complement each other, a data mesh focuses on data ownership and management, whereas a service mesh focuses on networking and communication between services. Does it make sense to talk about service mesh in the context of a monolith architecture? Service meshes are designed to address specific challenges associated with microservices architecture. Talking about a service mesh in the context of monolithic applications generally doesn't make sense. Here are the key reasons why. Communication patterns. In a monolithic application, intercomponent communication happens internally within the application, often through direct function calls or shared memory. A service mesh, on the other hand, manages communication over the network between separate services, which is not applicable to monolithic architectures. Deployment complexity. Monolithic applications are typically deployed in a single unit. A service mesh is designed to handle the deployment and scaling of multiple services independently, which is not relevant to a monolith. Does a service mesh work only with microservices and distributed computing? Microservices architecture has ushered in the decentralized approach to software delivery. Between the infrastructure and the code, the layer that needs to function seamlessly is the networking layer. In modern containerized applications, a lot of focus is on the infrastructure and packaging and deployment of code, but traditionally not as much on networking. This has been changing recently with the advent of the service mesh. Networking in the context of containerized applications. Network communication was pretty simple back in the day. The network relayed messages from clients to servers and back. You could easily trace the route messages, take the few touch points across the network, and easily debug latency issues and errors. It took just a single monitoring tool like Nagios. In a containerized app, each application is made up of loosely coupled microservices. Each microservice is made up of multiple containers, or pods in the case of Kubernetes. Every request now touches multiple services, and to make things worse, each of these services are dynamic. Containers are created and destroyed automatically as the system changes and as deployments are made. Still, communication between these services needs to happen seamlessly, and this is the job of the service mesh. A service mesh handles east-west traffic. The reason why the service mesh is important in microservices is that communication between distributed apps is more complex than with monoliths. Service mesh versus Kubernetes. If you are already a Kubernetes aficionado, you might be scratching your head and wondering, why do I need a service mesh when Kubernetes already handles so much? That's a totally fair question, and I'm here to clear things up. Kubernetes is fantastic for managing containerized applications, handling deployment, scaling, and even some aspects of service discovery and load balancing. But here is the catch. As your microservices grow in number and complexity, the gaps in Kubernetes' native capabilities start to show. Here is a fun analogy. Imagine Kubernetes as a bustling city. It handles the construction of building your applications, maintain roads, the network, and ensure resources like water and electricity, compute and storage are available. But what happens when you need sophisticated traffic control to prevent gridlock, or you want detailed surveillance to monitor every street corner? That's where a service mesh steps in. Service meshes like Istio, Linkerd, and others offer a range of features that go beyond what Kubernetes alone provides. These include advanced or intelligent traffic management, like canary releases, A/B testing, and retries, robust security with automatic MTLS encryption, deep observability through detailed telemetry data, and more. These features can significantly enhance the development and operation of microservices, especially in complex, large-scale environments. Keep in mind that most service meshes actually do require an orchestration system like Kubernetes to be in place. Service meshes offer extended functionality, not a replacement. Josh Freelinga, what is a service mesh? However, using a service mesh isn't always the right choice for every scenario. There are considerations to keep in mind. Complexity. Implementing a service mesh adds complexity to your system. It introduces new components like sidecars and requires additional operational overhead to manage and troubleshoot. Compatibility. Not all services or systems may be compatible with a service mesh out of the box. You might need to experiment and adapt your services to work effectively within a meshed environment. Cost. Running a service mesh consumes resources, both in terms of computational power and potentially in costs associated with monitoring and observability tools. Do I need a service mesh only when working with Kubernetes? You don't need a service mesh only when working with Kubernetes. While Kubernetes and service meshes often go hand in hand, thanks to Kubernetes' popularity for hosting microservices, service meshes are versatile and can be used in various environments, virtual machines, or different orchestrators. Mesh gateway versus API gateway. Both a mesh gateway and an API gateway play crucial roles, but they serve different purposes. An API gateway acts as a front door for your clients, handling requests and routing them to the appropriate services. It manages things like authentication, rate limiting, load balancing, making it easier for clients to interact with your services. It stands between your microservices and the outside world. On the other hand, a mesh gateway is used within a service mesh to manage traffic entering and exiting the mesh. It's all about handling service-to-service communication by mediating requests inside the microservices architecture. When I use a service mesh, do I have to take infrastructure as code like Terraform files out of my microservice source code? You don't have to remove your infrastructure as code files like Terraform from your microservice source code when using a service mesh. The service mesh operates as the network layer to manage communication between services, while your infrastructure as code files handle infrastructure provisioning. Keep using infrastructure as code to define and manage your infrastructure as usual. When I use Kafka for managing communication between my services, do I still need to use a service mesh? Using Kafka to manage communication between your services is fantastic for handling asynchronous, event-driven interaction and acting as a centralized hub for your microservices. It simplifies service-to-service communication by using events instead of direct calls. However, Kafka focuses on data flow and doesn't inherently tackle concerns like security, observability, and traffic management, which is where service meshes come into play. A service mesh, like Istio, can complement Kafka by adding layers of functionality such as load balancing, fault tolerance, and fine-grained control over service communication. So even with Kafka, a service mesh can enhance your overall architecture by addressing those additional aspects. So let's sum it up now. Service meshes shine by providing the backbone for secure, efficient, and observable in-service communication. Meanwhile, data meshes revolutionize data ownership and governance by ensuring each data product is managed with care and precision. As you navigate the intricate web of microservices and meshes, it's essential to appreciate the symbiotic relationship between these components. They not only solve distinct challenges, but also complement each other to create a robust, adaptable ecosystem. Dive deeper, experiment boldly, and let the power of service and data meshes propel your applications to new heights. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more updates and tech insights. See you next time.